I knew I was screwed the moment Cole Henderson called me kiddo in front of the board. Picture this: a sleek San Francisco conference room full of venture capitalists who treat Patagonia vests like clerical robes. And me, Riley Monroe, 37, sleeves rolled, caffeine still vibrating in my bloodstream after a 70-hour sprint to keep Stratify systems from flatlining. And there's Cole, lounging in his ergonomic throne like he'd just solved global warming, scrolling through my demo deck with the smug serenity of a man who once watched The Social Network and decided Zuckerberg was misunderstood. "The team worked hard," he said, flashing that startup bro grin, "but the architectural pivot, that was my call. We needed to streamline for scale." Streamline? Please. I didn't pivot anything. I rebuilt the whole damn backbone from scratch after the last CTO rage quit over our spaghetti-coated disaster. I wrote every controller, rebuilt the CI/CD from the ground up, even patched the legacy payment API some intern had hard-coded into a public repo. But sure, Cole, tell them about your vision. That was when it clicked. Not the betrayal. I'd seen that coming since he first borrowed my Jira notes and passed them off as weekend brainstorming. But the performance. They never wanted a builder. They wanted a voice. Loud like Cole, who repeated my sentences verbatim, just 10 decibels higher and 15 IQ points lower. Once, after I'd spent an entire weekend fixing his failed rollout, he told me I was too quiet to lead. So I stayed quiet and watched. The meeting ended with polite applause, a handshake for Cole, and a single pity cupcake for me. Red velvet, no napkin. I choked it down while listening to him field questions about his approach to adaptive load balancing. Spoiler, the man once asked me what async meant and followed my medium link reply with, "Ah, got it." He didn't see the post-it on my fridge with deployment timelines. The sleepless nights I spent staring at blinking terminals praying I hadn't left debug mode on in prod. He never knew about the custom Git hook that tagged every build by whichever Starbucks I finished coding in. When Cole sent the board my final code package, it came straight from a zip file I'd personally handed him on a silver USB, labeled Production Final Full v4.zip. He didn't fork my repo. He didn't even know what a fork was. So I smiled, handed it over, and congratulated him on his brilliant slides, the ones with my wireframes, my roadmap, and even my typo on integration. Walking out of that room felt like selling someone a ticking Rolex molded from wet clay. The next morning, HR called. Restructuring. My position dissolved. Cole absorbing responsibilities. Would I like assistance packing up? "No thanks," I said. I already wrote my goodbye email 3 months ago. I left everything: the plant by the window, the scribbled sprint board, and one little thing on the server. A single silent line buried deep inside a back-end config, wrapped in a comment labeled, "Do not delete, critical patch." Then I walked out smiling, because Cole hadn't just stolen my code. He'd stolen exactly the version I wanted him to. There's a certain kind of silence that seeps in when your spirit starts leaking under fluorescent lights. Not anger, not grief, just that numb ticking where your mind whispers this can't be happening, but your body already knows it is. For 6 weekends straight, my apartment looked like a tech graveyard. Half-eaten takeout cartons, empty cold brew bottles, post-its forming constellations of paranoia. I lived inside a looping sprint: eat, code, crash, repeat. My monitor's glow was my moonlight. That was when Stratify systems became more ghost than company to me. A place I still haunted long after they'd begun erasing my name from projects. I rebuilt their entire web platform from scratch, line by line, like a surgeon trying to save a patient that didn't deserve the transplant. Scalable, multilingual, modular. Every dependency mapped, every abstraction logged. I even recorded voice memos in case someone else ever had to maintain it. Some poor soul unaware of the duct-taped miracle they were inheriting. Spoiler, someone did have to maintain it, just not the way I expected. One Monday morning, while I was still technically on payroll, Cole strutted into my office with that signature you're about to clean up my mess grin. "Hey, kiddo. Big reveal in 30. Don't miss it," he chirped, tapping the doorframe like he was blessing it. I blinked. "What reveal?" He just smirked and disappeared in a trail of Axe body spray and Red Bull ambition. Curiosity, that old betrayal, dragged me to the so-called war room, the space they loved to pretend was a strategy chamber when it was really just a windowless mausoleum for morale. Cole dimmed the lights, cleared his throat, and pulled up the deck. And there it was. My interface, my wireframes, my architecture diagrams. Even my typo, still there. Seamless integration for client onboarding. The one I'd made at 2:43 a.m. during a caffeine panic, then cried over into a bowl of cereal. Cole didn't fix it, but he fixed the credit. Every we in that presentation was him. Every I was louder than thunder. "I realized we needed a more robust data pipeline," he said, clicking through a diagram I'd scribbled on a Chipotle napkin. "So I restructured the logic here." Restructured, sure. That's what he called showing up at 11 a.m. with a green juice, glancing at my screen, and calling it leadership. The board nodded, impressed. One of them whispered, "Finally, some senior initiative." Cole beamed like he'd just invented oxygen. Then he turned to me. "And let's give Riley a round of applause. She worked on some back-end stuff. Some back-end stuff." They handed me another red velvet cupcake, this time with a toothpick flag that said, "Thank you." It felt like someone ran over your dog and offered you a car wash coupon. I walked out with my jaw locked so tight it could have cracked my molars. Back at my desk, I pulled up the shared drive, copied the entire presentation, and archived it with timestamps, metadata, and a note to myself. Trust no one who says we're family at work. Then I checked the repo. Still untouched. Still pristine. Cole hadn't forked it, hadn't cloned it. He was running my build. The one labeled production final full v4.zip. And that meant something beautiful. He had no idea what else was inside that build. That night, I stared at my terminal, the reflection of the code dancing on my face like candlelight at a confession. I wasn't angry anymore. I was surgical, because inside that final build, deep in the config, was a silent seed, harmless for now. A fuse, and someday soon, Cole Henderson would light it himself. I had just become patient zero for a new strain of corporate vengeance. They always choose Fridays. Something about optics, I guess. Easier to disappear an employee when the break room's full of bagels and half the office is coasting on sparkling water and exhaustion. That Friday, I'd barely taken my first sip of burnt break room coffee when my Slack pinged. HR. Mandatory 1-1. Conference room B. 10:30 a.m. No emoji. No hey. Just cold text on a glowing screen. The digital equivalent of a toe tag. I knew what it was. Not because I'm psychic, but because Cole had been too happy all week. His Patagonia vest looked tighter, his small talk louder. Yesterday, he'd even called our intern sport. That's his tell. Whenever Cole starts acting like a dad at a Little League game, someone's about to get benched. So I dressed the way people do when they've already made peace with the ending. Clean jeans, clean hair, clean conscience. I cleared my browser history, logged out of every session, and packed my messenger bag with the efficiency of someone who's been through this circus before. Only this time, the bull was mine. And it was wired to explode. At 10:28, I walked into conference room B. HR was already seated, along with a man who looked like he'd been grown in a lab to smell faintly of toner and fear. "Riley," said Jessica from HR, blinking too often. "We want to thank you for everything you've contributed, but the company's undergoing a strategic realignment." Strategic realignment. Corporate for, "We're making you disappear." I didn't blink. Didn't even flinch. just stared at the manila folder she slid across the table like it was a confession letter. "Cole will be taking over your responsibilities," she added, as part of his transition into the VP of product role. So that's what my code was worth. A new title, a corner office, and a company LinkedIn post full of fake congratulations. I asked if I could pack up my things. She nodded, but said security would escort me, as if I might shove trade secrets into my hoodie pocket. Back at my desk, I found it already half-packed. My monitor was off, my name tag gone. Someone had even watered my plant, probably Tina from sales, who meant well, but once voted against unionizing because she thought Slack polls were legally binding. I loaded my bag, notebook, charger, mechanical keyboard, because if they think they're keeping my clicky keys, they've got another thing coming. Then, from the bottom drawer, I pulled out a small black USB drive labeled Vacation Photos. Spoiler, there were no vacation photos. What it held was far more interesting. A custom staging server deploy script, 3 alternate builds of the platform, and one very particular zip file, production final full v4.zip. The same one Cole had installed, the same one I'd modified 3 nights earlier. Hands shaking, whispering into the empty room. "You want credit? You better take all of it." I didn't say goodbye, didn't do the pity rounds. I just left my farewell cupcake in the fridge beside someone's forgotten yogurt and a post-it note that read, "Do not eat. Thanks, Karen." On my way out, the security guard, a kind guy named Mike, mid-40s, hockey dad energy, asked if I wanted a minute to collect myself in the lobby. I smiled. No, I'm good. And I was. So good, in fact, that by the time Cole realized something was wrong, I'd be 3 contracts deep into freelance work, sipping cold brew in a co-working loft where no one called me kiddo. Because what Cole didn't know, what HR would never understand, was that the version of the system he'd just absorbed came with a little souvenir. A function hidden in plain sight, wrapped in comments, asleep, waiting for its date to arrive. And when it did, Stratify Systems wouldn't go up in flames. It would simply vanish. Not deleted, not destroyed, redirected to a white page with a single line of text. I closed my laptop that afternoon, stepped into the California sunlight, and smiled for the first time in months. The fuse was already burning. 3 weeks before HR slid that manila folder across the table, I'd been alone in the office at 11:46 p.m. The place was hollowed out, all hum and buzz. Fluorescent ghosts flickering over rows of empty desks. Outside, cleaning crews whispered through the hallways like surgeons tidying up after a failed operation. Inside, I was performing mine. No rage, no dramatic soundtrack. Just code. Precise, deliberate, mechanical. My cursor blinked like a metronome keeping time with my pulse. I opened the back-end config file, the one Cole never understood but always took credit for. He once called it the boring stuff. He had no idea it was the heart that kept Stratify's Frankenstein monster alive. And then I typed, "That's it, plain, harmless." A whisper buried between OAuth keys and a deprecated logging toggle. It didn't delete anything. I'm not a monster. It didn't corrupt data, didn't erase backups. All it did was redirect the live build to a static white page on a private server. I spun up one weekend while eating takeout and fantasizing about poetic justice. The page itself was pure minimalism. White background, centered Helvetica text. "This platform is temporarily unavailable. For enterprise-grade rescue services, please contact R. Monroe Solutions." Invoice attached. Below that, a tidy little GitHub link. Every breadcrumb pointed neatly back to me. Timestamps, commit trails, author signatures. Technically, nothing malicious. Technically, just a redirect. Legally deniable. Morally satisfying. I closed the file, saved it, pushed the build. My coffee went cold. My fingers trembled. Then I just sat there, staring at the terminal until the glow of the monitor painted my face like confession light. The timer was set for 1 week after the board meeting. No one else would notice it. Not the devs, not QA, and definitely not Cole. He didn't read code. He read charts. He didn't fix bugs. He fixed narratives. That's what made it perfect. People always talk about revenge like it's fire, all sparks and explosions. But mine? Mine was a fuse. Silent, elegant, hidden beneath the architecture of something beautiful I'd built with my own hands. A trap disguised as craftsmanship. And if Cole had ever bothered to read a single changelog, he might have seen the warning I'd left him. V4.4.1 Stability improvements. Date logic refactor. Leave as is. He didn't. Instead, he thanked me with a cupcake and a pink slip. So I left him with a platform. A ticking one. I pictured him on launch day, hair slicked back, rehearsing buzzwords about scalability while investors nodded and interns clapped on cue. I could almost see the moment, the click, the refresh, the blink. And then, nothing. Just a white screen, a neat invoice, and a GitHub repo with every commit stamped R. Monroe. It wasn't destruction. It was authorship. By the time the system blinked out, I'd be long gone, freelancing under a pseudonym, taking contracts from companies that paid before they talked. That night, I left Stratify's headquarters for the last time. The city was silent, fog curling around the streetlights like smoke from something already burned. I walked past the glass lobby, past my own reflection, a ghost with a backpack and a plan. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a cog inside someone else's startup dream. I felt like an engineer again, one who built things that worked. And this one? Oh, it was going to work beautifully. The countdown had begun. Mondays hit different when no one's hovering over your shoulder asking for a quick sync before coffee. My first Monday out, I woke at 9:42 a.m. to sunlight instead of Slack notifications. No meetings, no pings, no fake emergencies. Just me, a bagel, and the quiet hum of my laptop. I'd even adopted a cat the night before, a calico with attitude. I named her Merge Conflict. By 10 a.m., I'd finished setting up my new Upwork profile under my freelance alias, RM Knox. Location, remote. Tagline, full stack dev. Fast, quiet, precise. Within 2 hours, I'd already landed 3 gigs. 2 were minor crud jobs. The third, a full rebuild for a finance startup drowning in legacy code that looked like it had been written by an enthusiastic raccoon. I charged my full rate. They didn't blink. While Docker did its thing in the background, curiosity got the better of me. I opened LinkedIn. There he was, Cole Henderson, framed in golden hour lighting with that smug sepia-tone humility. Honored to step into the role of VP of Product at Stratify Systems. Grateful to lead such an incredible team. Excited for what's next. Reaction count, 312. Comments, the usual suspects. Couldn't happen to a better guy. Teach me your ways, Cole. I scrolled until I found the one that made me snort into my coffee. The CEO's comment. Your leadership during the relaunch was masterful. We're lucky to have you. The same CEO who once called me Rachel from IT in a company-wide email. I closed the tab, not bitter, just confirmed. The system wasn't broken. It worked exactly as designed. Reward the loudest voice, forget the builder who kept the walls from falling. By Tuesday morning, my old Slack workspace started leaking. Not intentionally. I'd simply forgotten to revoke access to a sandbox account tied to my dev email. Pure accident. In the channel Prod Bugs, the panic was palpable. Logs were spitting errors referencing something called Module Hydra. That was my framework, a scalable middleware layer I'd built when our old stack kept collapsing under load. Each head handled a specific microservice, all feeding into a central node that managed client states and tokens. Elegant, powerful, completely undocumented. Why? Because Cole once said, "Nobody needs that level of detail, Riley." Now, that same unnecessary detail was breaking the internet. API calls looping endlessly, CPU spikes, recursive threads multiplying like rabbits on caffeine. Every attempt to trace it led to the same console output. Warning: Hydra does not respond to mortal commands. That one was for me. A junior dev suggested commenting out Hydra entirely. I almost choked on my toast. Removing it would have nuked authentication, billing, session persistence, basically the company's pulse. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, guilt seeped in. Not for Cole or management, but for the engineers still trapped there. The ones who stayed late, not for bonuses, but because they didn't want clients to suffer. They didn't deserve this. But Cole did. He thought code was decoration, thought a platform was something you presented, not understood. By Thursday, the countdown had 3 days left. No alarms, no warnings. Then, exactly 1 week after my exit, 10:01 a.m. Pacific, the fuse reached the core. No explosions, just silence. Somewhere in Stratify's downtown office, a mouse clicked, a page reloaded, and the company's entire platform blinked out of existence. Not a 404, not maintenance mode, just white. Center-aligned Helvetica text appeared. This site is currently offline. To restore access, please contact RM Knox. Systems consultant. Invoice attached. Invoice total: $148,000. Line items: full stack rescue deployment, middleware stabilization, data integrity assurance. Clean, professional. I even debated adding clip art, maybe a sad clown. But restraint, I decided, was elegance. The page was hosted on a $5 a month server in Oregon. Best $5 I'd ever spent. The attached GitHub repo was public, fully documented, commit logs stretching back 10 months. Every file tagged, every module attributed, every change authored by R. Monroe Knox. Within minutes, Stratify's internal chat exploded. Screenshots started leaking to Twitter. Who is RM Knox? Why is there an invoice on our homepage? Is this legal? Meanwhile, I sat on my couch, Merge Conflict asleep on my hoodie, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the empire implode. The fuse had done its job, and Stratify Systems, my ghost of an employer, was now nothing but a white screen and an unpaid bill. The first email landed in my inbox at 7:42 a.m. Tuesday. Subject line: We'd like to talk. Sender: chair@stratifyboard.com. No. Dear Riley, no greeting, just 3 lines that smelled like panic and corporate cologne. We're currently investigating a system-wide outage affecting the Stratify platform. We understand you may have insights or resources that could assist. Please let us know if you're available for a conversation this week. Funny how fast Quiet Coder turns into valuable resource once the entire product is reduced to a $148,000 invoice and a GitHub repo signed by the ghost they fired. I didn't reply. Not right away. Instead, I made breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, sourdough, and actual butter. None of that margarine propaganda they stocked in the office fridge. I ate slowly, watching sunlight crawl across my kitchen floor, while Merge Conflict hunted dust particles in the air like she was chasing ghosts. By noon, the news was already leaking. Cole Henderson, temporarily suspended pending internal review. Translation: human sacrifice to appease the investor gods. They'd spent 36 hours combing through backups, all of which, ironically, were tied to AWS credentials Cole never had full access to because he thought DevOps was just a vibe. The only engineer who did know the keys had quit months ago after Cole called him emotional for refusing weekend shifts. Without access, Stratify was dead in the water. They could rebuild from scratch, sure, but that would take 6 to 8 months. Minimum. And they'd still have to find someone who understood Hydra. Good luck with that. I refreshed Reddit just to see how far the chaos had spread. Someone from the dev team had started a thread titled "Reverse Engineering Hydra Possible?" The top comment simply said, "Bro, no." Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time from Marcus, a developer who'd quietly kept in touch. Boards in full triage. They finally read your repo. They're impressed. Cole's throwing everyone under the bus like it's cardio. I texted back a single emoji. Then I opened an old spreadsheet, one I hadn't touched since my final week at Stratify. Tab name, Legacy Domains. Row 14, northgrid.io. Active. Owned by RM Knox LLC. There it was. Still mine. Still green. Northgrid. That was Stratify's original name before they rebranded. They dumped it after the acquisition, thinking something sleek and forgettable would impress investors. What they forgot was that half their old client dashboards and 5 years of SEO were still tied to that domain. I had quietly bought it 6 weeks before leaving. $14.99 on a registrar Cole once mocked as too sketchy to trust. So I owned their past. Their present was broken. And their future? That depended entirely on me. At 5:06 p.m., I finally replied to the board chair's email. Happy to discuss. Please route all inquiries through RM Knox Consulting. Terms and availability listed here. www.rmonrotech.devs. Rates. 15 minutes later, my site analytics spiked 600%. IP traces, Stratify's corporate subnet. I imagined them huddled around a boardroom monitor, reading my consulting rates in silence, the color draining from their faces. Rescue package. $147,000. Initial deployment recovery. 30-day retainer. Upfront payment required. No meetings under 30 minutes. All communication via email or scheduled Zoom. No Cole Henderson present. They wanted a hero. Too bad they'd fired the engineer. By 7 p.m., my Stripe dashboard pinged. Payment pending. They didn't even negotiate. Of course they didn't. Negotiation requires leverage. And they'd given that away the day they handed me a cupcake instead of a contract. Later that night, another email came in. Subject: You did this. Sender: Cole Henderson. No greeting, no punctuation. You could have helped. You didn't have to make it personal. I didn't type a speech. Didn't remind him of the nights I spent saving his rollout, the code he stole, or the meeting where he called me kiddo. I just sent one reply, and then attached a PayPal invoice. Memo: Emotional damages, non-refundable. Amount: $17,000. That night, I danced barefoot in my kitchen, Merge Conflict sprawled on the counter, Billie Eilish thumping through the speakers like a war drum. Not gloating, not revenge drunk, just seen. For the first time in years, I wasn't an invisible cog inside someone else's empire. I was the architect of my own, and the people who once signed my paychecks, they were just clients now. A week later, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. Eli, one of Stratify's old interns. He was one of the good ones, the kind who apologized when meetings ran long and actually pushed commits that compiled. His text came through an encrypted Slack channel we used to use for memes during all hands. You didn't hear this from me, but they're dropping the rebrand. Investors hate Stratify. SEO's tanking. They're going back to Northgrid. I nearly snorted cold brew out my nose. Of course they were. They'd spent millions trying to rename themselves into something buzzwordy and sterile. Stratify Systems, empowering synergy through scalability. Turns out, you can't polish a burning platform. Clients wanted stability, not slogans. And Northgrid, the name I owned, still carried 5 years of goodwill, backlinks, and recognition. It wasn't just poetic. It was perfect. 5 days later, it happened. A polite email from a digital brand consultancy landed in my LLC inbox. Vague phrasing, clearly written on behalf of someone else. We're reaching out regarding the potential acquisition of a dormant domain currently registered to your company. Our client would be happy to make a competitive offer. I replied 5 minutes later with a PDF. Subject: Northgrid, EO. Premium Legacy, Brand Reinstatement Package, Transfer Fee, $250,000 execution, window, 48 hours. Terms: no installment plans, no contingencies, no further contact post-transfer, no smiley face this time, no threats, no gloating, just a price. They paid it in full. Wire transfer cleared within the day. No call, no apology, no we regret how things ended. Just silence. And a few hours later, a LinkedIn notification popped up. Cole Henderson, on leave, exploring new opportunities. I stood barefoot in my kitchen, holding my phone, laughing so hard I dropped it into the sink full of dishes. Merge Conflict flicked her tail like she knew exactly what I was celebrating. That was it. Not revenge, control. They'd wrung me out, used my silence like it was compliance, and discarded me when I stopped being convenient. But silence isn't weakness, it's a strategy. And when timed right, it detonates. I poured myself a glass of cheap champagne I'd been saving for nothing in particular, toasted my reflection in the kitchen window, and whispered, "To the quiet ones." Because that's who we are. The people who stay late, who fix things without credit, who hold the company together with tape and caffeine, the ones they overlook until the lights go out. A week later, my site traffic was still climbing. Every analytics ping was another suit trying to figure out who RM Knox really was. Every visit from Stratify's subnet was another executive learning how it feels to pay for what they once took for granted. I didn't rebuild their system. I didn't have to. They'd already proven my worth by breaking without me. Now, I build on my own terms. Retainer only, prepaid, contractually protected. No more were like family nonsense, no cupcakes, no unpaid overtime disguised as passion. Just work that matters, clients who respect it, and invoices that clear before I open VS Code. Cole's name still circulates sometimes, whispered in online tech circles like a cautionary tale. That VP who tanked a platform after stealing from his engineer. There's always a new company, a new hustle, a new LinkedIn post full of redemption hashtags. But I don't check anymore. I've moved on. My new projects are quieter, cleaner. Mine. The kind you can sleep beside without worrying they'll explode at 10:01 a.m. And somewhere out there, Stratify, or Northgrid, or whatever brand name they try next, is still rebuilding piece by piece, probably under a new CTO with a shiny MBA and a panic disorder. If they're smart, they'll read the logs. If they're smarter, they'll read the comments. And if they're wise, they'll remember that the quiet ones are the ones who build the walls, set the foundation, and when pushed hard enough, know exactly where to plant the fuse. So yeah, call it revenge if you want. I call it version control.